Ishita and I conducted this workshop on archiving health history. This workshop actually highlighted balance that is needed in medical storytelling, whether it's adjusting to the changing body types, integrating arts with medical as well as historical interpretation, or navigating the ethical choices in sharing the medical experience. We felt strongly that this dialogue needed to continue. And that's the reason why we invited the participants as well as had an open call for those who are interested in putting up this exhibition space in a medical college. Our aim is not to be preachy, of course, but to create a more compassionate and culturally aware healthcare environment, ultimately leading to a better patient outcomes and stronger community relations. We strongly believe, as a part of Humanities and History of Medicine department, in the power of narratives. Stories are inherently personal and challenging our beliefs, often navigating the complex realms of grey rather than simplicity of just black and white. Each story here also offers a very unique perspective if you actually go through it and engage with it, and can be interpreted in so many ways. This diversity, in many ways, again, enriches our understanding, fostering empathy as well as connection. Our goal is to inspire students to engage with these stories, reflect on their meanings, and consider how they resonate with their own beliefs and experiences. Through this exhibition, we hope to educate and provoke thoughtful dialogue, leading to deeper appreciation of the rich tapestry of human experience that our museum seeks to preserve as well as share. Before I invite Dr. Manjulika Vaz to start the panel discussion, I would like to acknowledge the support of the management in their unending encouragement and commitment to promoting our intellectual discourse. We extend our gratitude to our esteemed director, Father Isudas, who came for the inauguration, the Associate Director of College and Research Institute, Dr. Charles David, the Research Institute Dean as well, Dr. Tony, and the Dean of Medical College, who are not able to be here today but has sent their best regards. Many thanks to Mr. Manohar, Mr. Ali, Miss Krishnaveni in our department. My gratitude also goes to my colleagues, Dr. Manjulika Vaz, Dr. Olinda Thames, Mr. Akash, Ms. Ananya, Ms. Tejashri, and Ms. Riya. Thank you so much. Now, a lot of thanks to all the people who have actually made it possible to come here today. We also have our vice deans, Ms. Anuradha, Dr. Anuradha, as well as Dr. Prem Moni, who are here with us today. Thank you for making time and coming here, sir. Last but not the least, this was all possible because of our co-curators. Ishita and I have so much gratitude to what you have done and what you have brought to this space. Thank you so much for actually coming here and doing this with us. Dr. Manjulika Vaz, my very dear colleague, is an assistant professor at St. John's Research Institute. She has a PhD in Allied Health Sciences, focusing on ethics and public perception of biobanking research. Her interests range from promoting humanity in medical education, environmental ethics, qualitative research methods of inquiry, gender rights and inclusiveness, and public engagement in research and governance. Thank you for agreeing to be a moderator.
Thank you, my pleasure.
We have Dr. Bobby Joseph with us, who is a professor at the head of the Community Health Department and Vice Dean of the Community Outreach at St. John's. He has a remarkable 32-year tenure in teaching. Dr. Bobby specializes in occupational health and is also passionate and is also sports enthusiast, particularly field hockey. He's an avid traveler and I'm very thankful for you being here. Ritvika Mishra is a program officer at India Foundation for the Arts, overseeing the Archives and Museum program at IFA. Previously, she worked as an assistant archivist at the Visual Archives of Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. where she has also been a part of curatorial team. With her knowledge in research, archiving, she worked as a research assistant for optics, media, aesthetics, and politics. Ritika was a fellow in strengthening US-India professional collaboration, a 5-day virtual workshop on museum collection and visitor engagement program. We have with us, Ishita, can you please come to the page? Thank you so much. We have Ms. Vidya with us, who is a children's writer and editor who wears many hats. She runs a content and design studio called Melting Pot that creates children's books and magazines for publishers based in Bangalore. She's one of the co-founders of Funky Rainbow, a Bangalore-based independent bookshop, and is also committed to bringing books and children together in exciting ways. And now, I would like to welcome my mentor, as well as the person who has curated the SL Bhatia Museum for almost 2 decades, Dr. Mario Vaz. I know that he needs no introduction, but anyways. Dr. Mario Vaz, after graduation, he worked for close to 3 years in Palamner, Andhra Pradesh. Following his MD, he was a visiting scientist at Baker Medical Research Institute in Melbourne, Australia, for 2.5 years. He retired as the head of Department of Physiology at St. John's Medical College and was also the head of Division of Health and Humanities. As well as curated the Bhatia Museum in St. John's. His extensive academic publications span a range of topics, including experimental human physiology, epidemiology, and public health bioethics and the history of medicine. Welcome, sir. Before we start the panel discussion, I would also like to welcome our Associate Director, our Dean, as well as the Vice Dean of St. John's Research Institute, and would like them to say a few words before we begin.
First of all, thank you, Radhika and Ishita, for curating this wonderful event. When I sat in the History of Medicine hall at the University of Frankfurt, behind the huge walls of the medical university hospital, I wrote that paper on the living organ donation, of course, in German. It inspired me also to move towards Hadamar to visit the concentration camp where the children were collected, not even respected. Around 2 lakh children lost their lives there. That altar-like stone spoke to me when I entered with enthusiasm to see that Hadamar archives. But I departed from the doors of that place with tears. This is how the archives and museums speak. Similarly, when I visited the Holocaust Museum in the Washington, D.C., those shoes left behind by those travelers spoke. I think the emotions, the pictures, the photographs, the walls, the bricks, preserved, speak to us much more concretely than our words. And I think the efforts like this will definitely keep our histories alive so that we do not repeat bad things, but at least learn for the better future. Thanks the Department of History and Medicine and the Humanities for keeping humanities alive. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for organizing such a wonderful event today. Speaking of narratives, when I was going through your museum, I was reminded of some great authors who have dealt with medicine in their narratives, great works of fiction. One was, some of you might have read this, Death of Ivan Ilyich by Tolstoy. And there's a man dying, and he reflects on his life, he reflects on illness. It's not a chronicle of his illness, but it's beyond that. It is about life, the meaning of disease, the meaning of a good body, because he has a servant taking care of him who has a able-bodied person. So it goes beyond that. So these are the kinds of thought processes that should come to us when we teach our students. But what happens is we just teach them so-called knowledge of medicine, and these aspects are never, there's no scope for us to introduce this in our classrooms. The MCI tells us what to do, and they even dictate our ATCOM modules. Attitude and communication is all top-down approach. I wish we could teach them Death of Ivan Illich or maybe a Sadat Hasan Manto. There's a story by Sadat Hasan Manto where an asylum is divided between two countries. So political actions, social actions impact health in a big way. And we are creating generations of doctors who are unaware of this. So this is a very welcome step towards engaging our students and making them think. So thank you, thanks again, and hopefully we'll have more of these exhibitions and programs. Thank you.
Just to follow up on Father Charles' story, when we grew up and read that some of the critical people who actually were behind the story of Nazism and who actually did it were all doctors who helped all the underlines understanding of superiority and who are inferior were all actually doctors. So I'm glad you brought this into the medical space. The primary thing that most doctors, all doctors are taught is actually history taking. So that's the first thing that we learn as part of our MBBS course. So it's good to know that more than the structured material that we are taught as part of the history taking, there's lots more to learn from the others who are also contributing to the learning of all those who are in the medical team. So with that, I congratulate your entire team. All the best.
Thank you very much, everyone. As a role, as a moderator, I just want to say that I think it's good to be inclusive and engaging, just like this whole project has been. So while we have a panel here, we have contributors in the room, we have contributors online. So if that's okay, panelists, I'm going to let it be interactive and engaging. Because to me, it has been fascinating to be part of this process where we are disrupting things, like Radhika said this morning. This is bridging those big chasms between disciplines and also breaking down hierarchies. I think somebody spoke about everything being top down. This is an opportunity for us to be bottom up, to learn, to hear, to listen, to engage, to immerse ourselves in the local, in the personal, rather than what we do in medicine, which is generalized, evidence-based conclusions. So where does that leave our reflectiveness and our experiential learning, which is so central? Medicine is an art. We often forget that. So with that, I want us to first hear from our panelists about what their thoughts and feelings were when they encountered this exhibition this morning. So Dr. Bobby, could I begin with you? Sorry, in terms of me being a little bit of a disciplinarian in terms of time management, the first is going to be 2 minutes per person, and then we'll engage with larger reflection.
Thanks, Manshika. I think let me start with my first exhibit which I saw, which is part of this, and I had some interesting discussion with her. I think your question to me in the email you sent was, what are we missing in the regular history reading? And I was telling them the story of dyes. We have adult dyes in and around. We used to have adult dyes in and around Bangalore. And when we started working with our community in a place called Muglur, about 30 kilometers from here, we had Lakshmama, who was our dye village. And we engaged with her in trying to find out what her concept of the womb was and how deliveries are conducted. And we got her to do what is called body mapping.
sitting on the floor there on a Kadapa stone, and she chalk piece drew what her concept of the uterus was and how she thought delivery was going to happen. And it was very interesting to find out what guys in those days thought about how the delivery process actually happened. Contrary to what we are taught in the OPG department for the world's greatest cities. We realized then that there's a lot of traditional knowledge which we are missing out on, which is probably the reasons why women behave the way they do when they have to go for a delivery. So that is not being captured in the kind of histories that we are taking in the wards, for example. And why does a woman come late for delivery? Why does she not take the medications she's supposed to take? Why does she not eat eggs? Why does she prefer to eat something else which is not very good for her? So these are things we are definitely missing out, I think, and these are things that I understand can be captured with the kind of exercises that we are doing. So that is a starting point. It's also telling her about an issue we have now in Tamil Nadu, something called the Sumagri scheme. The Sumagri scheme is a situation where young girls are recruited from drought-prone districts of Tamil Nadu and transferred to places, or they move to places in Tirupur, Salem, and industrial areas like that, where they are forced to work in a factory, in a mill. And at the end of 3 years, they give a certain sum of money which is supposed to be taking care of their wedding. So that's why it's called the Sumagri scheme. Now, our question was, and of course, in these factories, they harass, they abuse, suicides and things like that happening. And our question was, why are mothers sending their girls' children all the way to these factories to work when they know that the situation there is not great? And when we went down to Nagapattinam, my colleague Nancy and I were in Nagapattinam trying to get these histories from the mothers. And the mothers told us our daughters are safer in the factory than they're at home. So, I mean, it's something we would never have understood otherwise, right? That these are things happening even in our back door, which we don't understand the nuances of. So I think it's very important for us to, as medical students, when we start teaching medical students, the importance for them to actually delve into what societal problems are and understand why people are behaving the way they do. So it does make a lot of sense for me to understand this and learn from this experience.
Thank you very much, Bobby, for that. Just talking about social histories and socio-cultural histories, I want to turn to Ritvika, and she's coming from a museum space called the International Foundation for the Arts. I want to ask you, Ritvika, taking these histories and keeping them as archives in a museum, and now moving them into this space of a classroom of a medical college, what impact does that have from the archives to a personal common space?
So I think the moment I entered today, when I interacted with few of the works, I think I'll go back again, I have to. But the first thing which struck me was, Ishita and Radhika's name is from museum to the classroom. But it's also taking the classroom back to the museum, back to the institutions like these spaces. Because a museum and an archive, of course, it warrants a certain kind of storytelling. But an archive, if you look at it in terms of records and facts and figures and files, it's you who can create the story out of it. It's you with the human agency who puts the story, creates the narratives out of it. So, and it is both, which I always believe and say, and in my own practice, if I can say so, it is not only a site, it is a process. It is a continuous process of how you enable others also to build an archives. Archives are looked at very institutional spaces, often more very intimidating, not probably as intimidating as a hospital, but it is very intimidating for regulars, commoners to go in. I think what everyone did, both Ishita and Radhika, congratulations, and congratulations to everybody who kind of came in as co-curators. It is, I think, for a lot of these works, for myself, was a moment to kind of pause and think back whether we can inculcate these in our own practice. You don't have to be an archivist, you don't have to be a museum professional or a doctor to look at it. The way I think it was a co-curated project by two, who has documented how care was quote unquote delivered to us during COVID, and how we kind of are oblivious about these smaller aspects. I think these are like one of the finer examples that we can see, and it's a great enabler. I would say it's one of the starting and stepping stones.
That's lovely, Ritvika. Can I pause to ask one of the contributors a question? You know what Ritvika spoke about, this whole thing of the personal story becoming part of an archive versus now becoming part of the classroom and how it would go back to affecting their lives. Maybe Aparna, if I could ask you, how was it to bring your personal story to a public space, to sharing it with your co-curators and then bringing it out here? What was the feeling like?
Thank you, ma'am, for that question. Yes, there was definitely a sort of a trajectory involved. Because to take something which is a sort of a personal, I wouldn't say conflict, but definitely a dilemma with a lot of more questions than answers as to why, I mean, for those who haven't yet, it's a bit about, it's about bringing infant mortalities in the family out into the open, having conversations around it, also investigating the illness involved. In the case of my aunt, it was meningitis. It was in Lucknow, pre-partition India. So I myself was grappling with those questions for which I didn't have a lot of answers. Like, for instance, why was this not talked about enough? I hardly knew anything about meningitis. How did my grandmother cope with the loss of this child? I just heard that she kept it close for a very long time. I think the fact that I'm already a memory studies practitioner and I've been doing various archiving projects, I think that really helped. But having said that, to then bring it out into the open required a mind shift, because then you have to become a curator. So it's not, you're not just sort of getting answers to questions at a personal level, interviewing immediate family members. But the moment you bring it out into the public domain, there's a certain level of discomfort that you have to navigate. Because it's an element of now curation for the public, that, how much do you share, what do you not share, what are the questions you're raising, where do you not have answers, things like that. And then there's the creative curation, because it's from the museum to the classroom, how do you bring in both elements?
So thank you, Aparna. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you to all the curators for bringing that personal into the public. And now I'm turning to Vidya. So she is the storyteller who engages with young children and helps to publish children's novels. So Vidya, how do you see these personal stories being this intergenerational connection point? And how do you see your role and that endeavor really interspersing?
Thank you for that, Madhulika. It was, it's just lovely that histories get recorded so that these stories can remain, so that they're there to be, read or understood by people across generations. I mean, I work in the children's space, and children often are the center of the universe in many ways. They bind and bond, various generations together. And I think it's really essential that these are presented, these histories that we have been seeing today, are presented across generations. I mean, I think it's just absolutely vital, because otherwise we grow up without connections, without memories, without discoveries, which are such an integral part of, of experiencing things in life typically, right? So when I walked in and I was looking at Aparna's project about her atte, I remembered an aunt in my own family who had a mental illness, and how we were told about it by various relatives, and in a sense, not really cut off from her in any way. I mean, we were not asked to not be with her, or we were not told that we can't play any games with her. And I think, the difference between when Aparna was explaining her project to me about not even knowing of an aunt that was who was there in her family, I felt the fact that in our own family there were there was openness and there was stories, we could engage and interact with our aunt who had a mental illness, made a lot of difference to the way as adults we respond to it. So I think, we have a strong tradition of oral narratives in India, right? I mean, we are people who hear a lot of things, essentially. And I think it's very, very essential. It's especially lovely that many of the, people who are telling these histories are here today, because for me, just listening to them, hearing even more than reading, although I, write and I read for a living, basically, hearing them talk to me, made a huge difference. And I really say this to all the adults in the room that you have to make connections for all these histories with younger generations. That's the only way to keep these histories alive and to take away stigma. Because I just wonder whether we didn't, for Aparna herself, whether her aunt, she didn't know of her aunt because she was a woman. Is that why the illness was kept away? It's a question that struck me when I was looking at the exhibition. But I think it's very, very essential for a strong oral culture like ours to be able to hear these stories, to have them told. I think it's really significant.
Come back to more sections on storytelling and the role of narratives. Returning to Mario, a couple of areas that I would like you to connect with. One is medical education, but the other is really medical history. You've curated a history of medicine museum, and we hear a different type of story, we hear a different type of event being celebrated. So how do you think today's event of oral histories, personal narratives, could change our understanding of the human body, of medicine itself?
Thank you. So I think in the first instance, we have to recognize, or I recognize that medical schools generally have history of medicine and the humanities very far at the back of their minds. It's not something that's at the forefront. In St. John's, we were privileged that there was a remarkable doctor, Major General S.L. Bhatia, who gave his entire archives to St. John's, and that was the Nidus, or the History of Medicine Museum. But as a person who curated it for 2 years, it was a struggle to keep its survival going. And that's a tragedy. And I think we have to accept that. So long as the history of medicine is seen as something peripheral to an institution, even when you have such a legacy, I think is a tragedy. But if we look at the way the history of medicine is observed in medical schools, we tend to focus on, I think, roughly two things: personalities, who discovered what, and events, what did they discover? And what we don't focus on are the circumstances and the context in which that happened. So I think for me, the present exhibition actually brings that out. These were not discoveries in isolation. They were certainly, and those people were embedded in the societies that they lived in. And those of us who look at the history of medicine, one of the most trying things about trying to write anything in the history of medicine is a lack of that other gaze, the perspective from other people, not medical people, not doctors. If I'm writing the history of medicine, I medicalize it unintentionally, even if I try not to do that, because that's my training, that's my background. But there are many dots which need to be connected, and we can't connect those dots because we just simply do not have material. So I think what was exciting for me is the very presence of this material. If this could continue, even if it doesn't end up changing medical education, and that's a separate story, it still allows a certain stories to be preserved, which have every right to be preserved and which have every need to be remembered. I think that's where, which would contribute significantly to our own understanding of so-called the history of medicine.
Thanks very much. I'd like actually to hear somebody's story. Devankita?
Thank you so much. It's been a privilege to come here and present. So my story actually started during COVID only. The moment I lost my grandmother on whom I did the archive, the moment I lost her, I started to feel numb. And what I did not cry for one day. And then from the very next day, I started journaling and writing letters to her. I mean, as if she's present there and writing letters to her in front of her. So, and that way, the entire duration of 13 days, I did that. And slowly and steadily, I started to feel, that the time has come and she has had to go. So that feeling of loss and grief is permanent in my mind and head even today. And that time I realized it's very difficult to put out there in front of family. I mean, I have seen my family members, some of them are okay. I mean, I don't want to go to extreme details, but yeah, I mean, that's fine. Okay, she has grown old and she has gone, but what about her stories? And that feeling of grief, loss, and that gives me constant anxiety. And even now, presently, I am speaking and it's giving me anxiety. And when I was putting up the archive, I had a feeling that, I don't know how people will react to it. I'm skeptical of it. I'm skeptical of the archive. And I have put my grief over there, and I'm talking about mental health over there, and I don't know how people will take it. And also in an institutional space like St. John's Medical College, where there are experts, and I'm just putting up a story, my own story. It's a very personal story here, and so it has been a difficult, like Aparna said, for me, it's also a personal conflict. And talking in terms of psychiatry and this mental health in context of medicine, uh, I can put it out there. I have been taking medicines for that, antidepressants and anxiety pills. But the flashbacks still come, and it's a heavy thought on me. And throughout the duration of this curation, I had many flashbacks. And I sometimes I felt that, oh, I should step back. So actually, along with my grandmother, I was thinking of putting up the archive of my uncle also, but I couldn't do that because I don't have the bandwidth to put up, to maintain both of their memories through curation. So it was a difficult point.
Thank you, Devankita. I want now to turn back to Dr. Bobby. I just wanted to know, you've heard these couple of stories, anecdotes. Do you think that these methods could be used with our medical students? One thing which is clear is there is a sense of vulnerability also that you experience, what you shared just now, putting yourself out there, going back to those emotions, the thoughts, the conflicts. Just wanting you to reflect, would you think of this as a helpful process? Do you think we could engage with it, maybe at the first year level? We've done narrative writing with medical students. They've come through all the cramming to finish neat and come through and be part of this successful world of the doctoring. Do you think these processes of letter writing, reflection, archiving, memories?
Thanks, Mashika. That we do something called the rural orientation program, right? Now, to answer your question, yes, obviously we have to get this done, but the question is, how do you get this done, right? So when we take our students to the rural area to get them to, these are urban students. And these are guys who lived almost 99% of their lives in an urban area, cities like Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, places like that. And for us to take them to a rural area, get them to sit on the floor with an elderly lady or to chat with the guy who's milking cows or to talk with the farmer, it's a huge process, right? So I think it has to start with how are we going to equip these students to be able to go and talk to people about their histories. Forget about the health histories, even the way they've come into that city, into that village, and what have been doing in that village. The history of the village itself is going to be so much of information for those students. And getting us to do that is a little difficult. We've tried different methods. I mean, a little later on in the medical school, they come to us with a community health action program. We actually do some amount of qualitative research with them. So we get them to go to the homes of people, sit with the women in the temple courtyard and ask them to chat about their health problems and things like that. So without doubt, it has to be done. It's going to be very difficult. In our own experience, we've been doing this now for 30, 35 years, and we've had a lot of difficulty getting this done. I think Mario's was probably the first batch which went out for the rural orientation program. Things have changed, and getting our students to sync with the local population, being from all over the country and working with women and children in the southern part of India can be difficult. So yeah, long story short, definitely has to be done. How are we going to do this question?
Great, thank you. Mario, do you want to add to that? We've done some work with narratives, the anthologies of students.
So I think for me, the barrier to medical students actually being open to narratives, to other people's stories, has to stem or significantly stems from the attitude of us as educators. I think we tend to focus a lot on the doctrine, the curriculum. And I heard an earlier comment where the medical council tells us what to do and we do it. I do disagree. I think that we have a choice about how we do things. And I think when we start teaching medical students right from the very beginning, we have to allow them to be open to other people's stories. Otherwise, the stories of other people get converted into a medical history. Yes, medical students have to take histories of patients. I remember when I was a student, I was taught you record the history in the patient's words. Today, we don't record histories in patients' words. We have patient tells me a lot about the cough that he's suffering from, and I write cough, acute, 6 days, productive, this color, that. You're losing the narrative. So I think that there's a lot that can be done. It does require a mindset. And I think when people hear narratives, they have to also hear the unsaid. Because I can see that there are so many stories which are personal, they are difficult, and maybe for our own well-being, we sometimes sanitize the stories that we're telling. After all, I don't want to put myself all out for someone else to see. I mean, that's my personal space. So I think students also have to be sensitive to what is not being said. And this is also true when they take histories of patients. Patient is not going to tell you everything. You have to be sensitive enough to know, are they not saying something? And could that mean something significant?
Ritvika, do you have similar experiences when you're curating material for archiving, that there are some stories which are more difficult or some which are more, personal and therefore make it more vulnerable to put it out there?
I think one of the work for anyone who's worked in archives or has curated is to probably be able to read what is not being said, or being able to write or showcase what is not being said, what is not being written about, And it of course, of course, if we look at different kinds of set of materials or different sets of archives, let's say, there is always what can be like how Dr. Mario just mentioned, like the patient would narrate about their illnesses, but will not say about certain things. The archives also has that. The museum objects also has that. There are things that you read into and then you bring out the stories. At the same time, I think one of the crucial experiences, not only me, but anyone probably would have, but I can tell from my own experience of working, is that it's also about remembering, like the reason that we have archival spaces coming out in such platforms is, I think the society is remembering that way, and we are constantly against forgetting. And how does the society remembers? It's through your community commemorative practices, your bodily practices, which is a very close related to, I think, how we understand ourselves, our bodies. In one of the way how we look at our, we look back at certain probably our habits and think of it as a ritual. It be a very personal ritual to yourself, but when you Divankita, right? Sorry, you said you would put down letters, you would journal, collect all these stories for you, like what you had about your grandmother. Uh, it is kind of a commemoration, it's a very of a personal nature, but that kind of comes together as an archive in some form. You might want to call it an archive, you might want to not call it an archive. That's something that we can debate as well. So, and sorry, just to add, I think what both of you said, what I always felt, and that it's not to make a general statement, but I feel doctors essentially, because they deal with beings who are mostly always in a vulnerable state, has to be like really great communicators, which often, of course, they can't afford given the time, the schedule, the way it's practiced nowadays. But I think that's where such health histories and medical histories can come into play and create narratives to enable to create an empathy when you're talking to another human being. So yeah.
That's great. Jyotika. I'd like to bring in Geeta here, who's actually attempted to bring in a community story, community history in relation to health. So fascinating about BT and becoming the story spot.
Thank you, Manjulika. Thank you, Radhika and Ishita, for making this possible. I never knew that documenting and archiving a community's health wellness, one aspect of that could throw so much of insights as to how we live as a community. So mine is only a micro analysis of a macro problem. I've only taken a small sample. Briought was formed in 1977 as a purely residential area where people till 1995 would hesitate to come and habitate that place. But today, it is the one of the youngest area in Bangalore, wherein the average age is not more than 30 years, with the IT professionals living here who work in Electronic City, then Marathalli and other places nearby. They thought that this is a nice place wherein they are free. You come at 7 o'clock in the evening today, you will find that it is Bombay. The way they eat, the charts, you feel nobody cooks at home. What is this? And it was really very nice because when I do it contextual, it is not only it is the wellness in terms of infrastructure, contextual to food, air, traffic, and other things. So food, I would say, now today it is all youngsters. They are staying. It has become a highly commercial area wherein you have postgraduates. PG guest houses. Now food. Where do they eat their food? They order by Swiggy and Zomato. What is that toll on their head? Number one. Number two, even if they are staying and cooking, 3 or 4 people, where do they get their produce? From malls, from big basket, etc. What happens? People like me who are long term, we only patronize the street vendor because he gets the freshly harvested produce from the market or mandi the previous day and he sells it the next day. So my health is definitely better than the youngsters. Though they may have immunity now, it will take. Then next is water. So water, I wanted to find out whether they use RO water, boiled water, tanker water.
all this PG accommodation, the water is not sufficient. What is given by the Kaveri water supply BWSSB, it is only in BTM layout once in 2 days or twice a week. So how do they get their water? It is from tankers. And what is the quality of this tanker water? What is the effect on their health? So this I was not able to do. Then when we talk about traffic, we say the very big Silk Board junction. When you think of that, you get the jitters. So we only think of jams, but there is much more than that. See what help? You don't know the uncertainty of when you will reach your destination. Suppose you have to reach at 10 o'clock. You may reach at 10:30. What happens? Anxiety, palpitation leads to hypertension, diabetes. And it is not only the traffic jam that you get there, it is the signals. Signal in one part, the Udupi Garden part is 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
5 minutes, no, 4.75 minutes. That is how, and 8,300, this is a 2 years back report by the traffic police. 8,308 vehicles move out from BTM layout towards Silk Board. And Silk Board, when all the traffic comes there, 46,000 vehicles per day move there. So just imagine, it is the highest pollution area in Bangalore, no wonder. So it is not only this, the other thing is the people who are not going in their own cars, the bus stops. How do they reach the bus stop when you cannot cross the road? From one end of BTM, first stage to second stage, there is a road, you have to cross it. There is no traffic are continuously moving, only when there is a traffic jam. Oh, you say gladly and move from one place to another to catch a bus. Then bus stops are also not placed in the regular way. They also create further jam. So when we talk about traffic jam, we only think about slow moving traffic and this thing, but not the other areas. So when I looked into mine, this is 15 kilometers area. BTM layout is 15 kilometers. And what I have taken as the research is 2 kilometers. Hardly anything. And only 6 samples of 3 men and 3 women. It really threw some fascinating understanding, like how Bangalore being a city of allergies really is allergy, because 3 of the women have moved from Jamshedpur to Bangalore, and they are down with all types of allergies. But fortunately, because they are being older, 57, 82 and all that, they take indigenous medicine from Kotekal. They do pepper rasam, they have jeera rasam, munch jeera seeds, and then do pranayama, yoga, meditation. And I found interesting, it is the women who are the torch bearers of tradition, because they keep alive all these, I won't call it alternate, indigenous. We are not an alternate system of medicine. So I found that I hardly have touched the tip of what community understanding can be. And as Ritika has said, she said, why don't you mobilize youngsters to gather information? And maybe it will throw so much of light. Maybe this is needed for a growing city like Thank you so much, Ishita.
So back to you, storyteller Vidya. This is something like maybe indigenous recipe book. Yesterday I was part of a co-creation of methods of handling, diabetes and hypertension. And one of the things did come up. The doctor tells you, switch to millet, move from rice. But we don't know what to do, how to use it. With ragi also, mudde we can't eat. So is this a possibility? These kind of books to become popular?
So, I live in BTM layout, so it resonated for me very well. And one of my most favorite anecdotes about BTM layout was when Mangalyaan when it landed in Mars. Somebody tweeted from Silk Board saying, "Delighted you've gotten to Mars. I'm still at Silk Board." So it really did. I live back and I've lived in BTM for 30 years, so I absolutely get what you're saying.
Sure. We say that the largest number of startups is from Bangalore. So there is a joke which says that the young entrepreneur takes about 1 hour, 1.5 hours to travel in his car. So he finishes all his emails, messages, everything is over. He has got a small period of 20 minutes. What does he do? He looks out of the window and the thoughts go running at Eureka. He becomes a startup. And this is no joke. Why should I tell you? What happened to Newton? The apple fell on his head and comes the third law of motion. What happened to Archimedes? He slept and was enjoying his bath, and there comes the theory. So similarly, this is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, even a couple of years ago, I worked with Radhika and I think there was they wanted a few books on tuberculosis, and it was really surprising to revisit our own collection of children's books. I run an independent children's bookstore called Funky Rainbow. To go back into the collection and to actually find a couple of stories where we have, there's a patient in one story, the father of one of the children in a story has contracted tuberculosis. And the book, while it is about the little boy doing a lot for his father, it also documents in some ways, what the signs are, what the symptoms are in a story format. It's not talking medically because it's a book meant for children typically. And I was quite surprised how we could pick out a clutch of books to give her to say that, medical histories, even in a lateral manner, have been, documented in these books. The thing that I feel that's most significant in anything we do, especially these histories, is that people need to be able to see themselves in these histories. That's the great, especially when we work with children, and we work with children not just in urban cities, right? We work in rural areas, we work in different spaces, we work with, people across the spectrum, special needs, children with special needs as well. I think it's really important that stories are told in which children, and I'm sure it's valid for adults as well, to see themselves. It's only then that you open up. It's only then you don't think that you're being, you are unique in a way that makes you feel ashamed of something that's, that is in your life, really, right? So I think it's very, very important that these narratives and histories are presented as stories so that going forward tomorrow, another child need not wonder if there is an aunt whose story has not been told, if there's somebody who's suffering health issues because and has been stigmatized for a particular reason. I think it's absolutely essential that personal stories get told either in the form of fiction or non-fiction, so that we all can identify with it a lot.
That's so true, because I found that in today's narratives, there's also the breaking of stereotypes, breaking of what are conventional norms. And I'm going to call in Yogi, who's dealt with, I would say, a slightly controversial topic, which is in maybe medical terms kept, hush hush, or what Mario said, sanitize the way you handle issues to do with addiction, sexuality, reasoning behind certain behaviors are kept out of the classroom. So if you could share how some new realities have been brought to light, and what are you hoping to achieve in this whole process?
Thank you so much. So, I must confide in all of you. Even now that I have palpitations, I was not very sure about how the reaction is going to be. Because, the story, the setting up of the installation itself is extremely personal because I've been working on chemsex for 4 years now. And I have not put out any work which is at least circulated in India. And either it is perceived as you're encouraging drug consumption, you're encouraging a certain kind of sexual behavior, is what it is called, or you are negating the legal issue and the legal concerns that drug consumption has. But I must say the kind of response that I'm getting here with the installation, overwhelmingly very welcoming. And the idea, the question of just tell me what is chemsex. I have not heard this word. That, we are there now. That's where it is, that's where it has to start. One of the examples that I wanted to quote was it's a premier psychiatric institutions in the country, and when I went with one of the persons that I provide, that I'm part of their support system, uh, the questions were not asked, the right questions were not asked, but he was laughed at. And those laughs and those smiles and those quirks, and the minute the person says, I was part of an orgy, doctor's head goes down and why? Is the word orgy that important in a medical setup, like where, there's a person who is there because he's OD'd. He had injected around 22 units the previous night. And the reason for that, he only knows. I mean, no one really knows about it. So forget the attempt of knowing the reasons why a person is doing it. As an anthropologist, I'm familiar with some of the work which is mostly produced in the West, which talks about abjection as one of the reasons why gay men get into drugs. But chemsex is not only about drugs, it is also about sex. And chemsex is sex on drugs. There is a reason, or probably there is no reason, or there is as simple a reason as pleasure in consuming drugs and pleasure in having sex. So now, before setting up the installation and putting the stories together, I faced two challenges. One is I played around narratives of two persons, and I called them S and M very much on purpose. And the person S, I accompanied him to a private de-addiction center. I mean, the kind of treatment that he got and the kind of questions that he got. In 1 month, I know the person is sitting with the psychiatrist and a psychotherapist whom the psychiatrist brought on board, and a medical doctor whom the psychiatrist brought on board. They're all sitting together with him and discussing what really is the scene. On the other hand, M, when I took him to a public hospital, he was laughed at. There were squirms. So, I mean, the question is why is this happening? That is one. And on the second hand, I wanted consent to present these stories, right? I mean, even though I did not add personal details, as to when they came out and what their coming out experience was, it was a very conscious decision not to. I wanted their consent, and S had no qualms. I mean, he said, please go ahead. And he did suggest take out a couple of stuff, which I very promptly took out. M, on the other hand, no one knows where he is. I tried to contact the parents, I tried to contact the family, extended family, I tried to contact his best friends, I tried to contact his partner with whom he was there for around 22 years before he got into drugs. No one knows where he is. And if you look at the script at the installation, I think that is something which is speaking about invisibility, but this is self-imposed invisibility in so many ways, right? In the question of when we talk about drugs and when we talk about the questions of abjection itself, what is important is this invisibility. And there is a system around which does force you to become invisible. Can we start talking about all of these questions from the point of invisibility? Was the main intention.
Thanks, Yogi. That was really great. Any reflections or thoughts? Anyone? On what he said, or do you have questions that you would like to ask the panel or the contributors?
So first and foremost, thank you for bringing that out, because I think what you have actually highlighted is a problem that we have in medical education and therefore in medical practice. I think there are certain things which we don't talk about. It's just as simple as that. Or when we talk about it, we talk about it in such a medicalized way that it is actually removed from the social and cultural circumstance. And it's fine to, and in a way, I feel it's almost though we are creating those barriers, which then, if people have to be placed in a given situation, they have to figure out a way to break down those barriers to just communicate normally. So, you have actually highlighted an issue which, and there are many other issues like that, which are sort of taboo, subjects. I mean, I know I used to teach first year medical students, and we had a simple program on thinking ethics right from the day you join. And we talked about inclusivity, and we talked about things. And they at the stage they were very clear they wanted to be doctors who would be very inclusive. And then I just said, okay, so this is wonderful. Now tomorrow a person walks into your clinic and this is the type of person. How would you react to that? And it was clear that they suddenly were taken aback because they had to look at the situation which they now have to face. It's okay in abstract terms to say, I will be good, I will be inclusive, I will be do this. And so the point that you raised where people react and snigger and, look away, in a way, of course it's unacceptable. But it's also a tragedy because I often ask myself, what did those doctors go through which would actually make them react like that? And perhaps it's not a product of what their own thinking, it's a product of what they've gone through and how they think. So part of what I'm hearing is that medical education has to be open to all these things. And I feel that I really don't feel that we can start falling back on this notion that there is a national curriculum and this is what they do. And by the time they recognize certain things, I don't know how many generations of students would have gone through not knowing anything. I mean, you're talking about the situation that you gave. I had a simple situation where a student of mine had a seizure, and when and as we were attending to him, a vape fell out of his pocket while he was he had his fits, and I had to deal after that with people judging him for the fact that he had a vape in his pocket. And then there was a lot of people didn't know what a vape was. Now this is not here in St. John's. This is another place where I retired from here. But there are tons of things like that. So I feel that if not anything else, I think being exposed to stories like this should at least sensitize us to the fact that there are things out there which we need to start bringing into our discourse openly. And yes, I deal with first year students, and many things are embarrassing for first year students because when you go into the reproductive system and you start talking, you find some students look down, some students look up, and some looks side. But you have to meet it head on, right? But what do you meet head on? And there are obviously areas which we need to be open to. We have to hear those stories to know that they exist, that they have to be addressed, that people have to be sensitized to it.
Thank you for sharing these stories. I want to say, when we work with a lot of grown-ups in the children's space, we run a small course that says why grown-ups should read children's books. There's clearly a reason why we run that course, because the sooner you start, and her story came to mind as well. We had a book written by a writer during COVID called When the World Went Dark. It's about a young girl who loses her grandmother to COVID. And when you were talking about your own experience, I mean, she's perhaps younger than you, the fictional characters younger than you. But all the anxieties of being locked inside, of losing, your true friend at home, essentially, right? I feel, reading a lot of these books, and yes, I was talking to Mario before we began, saying how few people read right now. So even if they don't read, when these histories are documented, right? When these stories are documented and when they're available as stories for people to read or to look up on a website or an archive or even a museum, it makes a great deal of difference. We used to we went to we were working with a school in Chandigarh where there was clearly like a transgendered child in grade 11. The school didn't know what to do, but the school had admitted the child in, and the child was the butt of ridicule in various spaces, whether it was lunch or, in the playground or anywhere else, And we said, we do have some lovely children's books, about boys wanting to wear frocks, about girls wanting to do non-girly things. And the whole idea, I thought, was that it helped start the conversation. Why are we so afraid of people who are different? They are not. There's no need to be, right? This is a diverse world. And really, it's the grown-ups more often than not that require that sensitization. And that's why we say all grown-ups should read children's books.
I was intrigued by what you were asking about, histories from individuals, and Maria talked about people giving us sanitized histories of their health. Is that actually an experience? I think from a medical point of view, as a doctor, when I take history of patients, they probably giving me some socially desirable answers. But when you do it from a sociological point of view or from a point of view from a historian, are you finding that they tend to hide certain information, or do you find that they're quite open about? And this question is open to others as well. Do you think it's if you're getting a sanitized version of what they're actually experiencing, or do you get a more true story?
Sanitized, yeah, I would interpret that as, in fact, this could lead to a really interesting discussion on something I've been wanting to talk about, which is fake memory. So while archiving is important, I think what I've realized is that we are depending on people's subjective memories of something that happened a long time back. And we know with time, as we all know, we change, circumstances change, and our view of the original event also changes and how we feel about that. So sometimes it might happen not at a very obvious, it could happen just inadvertently that memories can change with time. So I think I would possibly not refer to it as sanitized, which could connote a deliberate obscurity or obscuring of facts, but I think it's to do with time, changing circumstances, and also I think it's very important for all of us to connect with our biases. And bias can also impact memory. That's been my experience.
Very fascinating point that you made regarding subjectivity. And I know that because I do qualitative research, and therefore, the hardcore researchers poo-poo this as saying, where is the hard evidence? Because what you're looking at are lived experiences where you're not generalizing to get the aggregate outcome. So actually, Dr. Randasamy, we were talking outside. If you could share your reflections, you are a trained medical practitioner who now is trying or grappling with changing the gaze, as it were. So the subjectivity and objectivity depends also on the lens that you take, from whose vantage point that you understand the phenomenon. So some thoughts or reflections, and then if we can also get people who are online, if they can unmute and share their stories with us, so that they don't feel disconnected, and we follow inclusivity in our program as well.
Thank you very much. I like to tell stories, as you know, or rather I like to write stories, and many of these stories refer to experiences in clinical practice. But one of the important things about history that the patient offers to you. Now it has changed over the period of a long time when institutional care has become the norm. So when a person enters an institution, he knows that the doctor's time is only a few seconds. So they swallow many of what they feel is not relevant to their point. And even the doctors don't look at them. Their gaze is on the computer screen, their gaze is on, like I say, it's digital gaze. So it's very difficult for us to focus on the patient history for the simple reason that the patients do not come out with what is very much within them. The entire atmosphere makes it forbidding. But one thing I can tell you, nowadays I don't practice, but I practice medicine as an uncle. Yeah, in our apartment complex, which has about 500, I'm at. So whenever somebody has pain or a fracture, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, they come to me, or I go to their house. I experience the family doctors. I feel the thing completely different. Here I'm not a professional. Uncle, I saw you playing the other day. What? See, you related to the family, to the grandfather, to the grandmother. What was all the noise last night you were making? All that thing. So they relate to me as an uncle, and I find their history, their relation is much more interesting, meaningful, and they're not scared to hold on. I can see their inside house, I can suddenly see, oh, that's a nice picture, things like that. This is what is missing the family practice atmosphere. We have institutionalized medicine. We have sanitized it to such an extent that neither the doctor's gaze falls on the patient, nor the patient's story reflects some of the intimate feelings they might have. Because they are afraid, they are ashamed, they don't feel that is the appropriate moment or the place.
Thank you. I'd just like to follow up on that because this question has also been on my mind. My name is Margot Cohen. I grew up in New York, but I've been living in Bangalore, and at the moment I'm teaching journalism at Azim Premji University. So while I am very sympathetic to the narrative medicine movement, you always come up against this practical question, which is the doctor-patient ratio and the sheer overload of patients, whether you're talking about PHC level or hospital level. So how can that be overcome, whether it's in the context of India, Indonesia, or New York City?
I think simply because we must acknowledge we have two participants from Bangladesh with us with the show. And one of the things that community engagement as a framework has allowed us, or rather empowered, is blurring these boundaries and looking at a lot of cultural preservation or concerns which emerge from cultural preservation. Right now it's about medicine. In other projects we talk about other subjects. It's to blur these boundaries and see ourselves as a larger group of people, human beings, talking to each other, connecting, wanting to connect. Just wanted to add, Partha is here, and Niju, who's also from Bangladesh, is currently studying in Mississippi and must be asleep. She's already been up, as we all know what the situations are. So thanks to them for expanding this conversation for us.
Yeah, I actually agree with what you're saying about the way medicine is taught and practiced in an institutional setting. And I clearly remember when I was an intern studying in St. John's doing my internship, the amount of time we had to interact with a patient was probably 15 seconds or maybe a minute at most. And my professor would say, write down the investigation, get it ready, and ask the patient to go and do it. But then I went to do my rural services we had in St. John's. I worked in Briought. And within the first week, the mother superior of the hospital where I worked in came and told me, what are you doing? When you're sending off patients, and every minute you're seeing a patient sending them off saying, go take this medicine. That's not the way you practice medicine. So she said, do you mind if I sit with you and see how we deal with patients? And so she sat there and she said, you're just not asking them questions. You seem to just treating them as a patient and not as a human being. So you've got to talk to them. And then I started talking to them, asking them about how's your grandfather, like Sir was saying, practice like a family medicine practitioner. You ask about their uncles, their aunts, their wife, and sorry about that. Yeah. And then you get to understand that the patients then start respecting you as a doctor. I really learned that by my own experience. So you ask them about their diet and also actually intervene in a way that makes sense to them. So they'll come and ask you, can I have brinjal today? I've got a fever. So you say, no, don't take brinjal, have ladies' finger, that's good for you. And they believe that it's true. And then you come back and say, okay, doctor, you gave me ladies, you asked me to eat ladies' finger, I'm much better now. That's what you were taught in medical school in St. John's, right? But those kind of things really help, connecting with the patients. And that's definitely a problem we have here. A doctor-patient ratio, like you mentioned, it's impossible to deal with the hundreds who come to a hospital like this. But if there is some way which we can find the time to spend more time with patients, I think that will help. I think family practice is the way to go. And we are now trying to revive a family practice. We have an MD in family medicine in St. John's. And we're hoping that those students at least are learning how to deal with an individual as part of a family and as part of a community, more than as an individual by himself.
In my research project, I interviewed two doctors, and one was a general practitioner. So the amount of insights he gave as to how he treated, he was a general practitioner, and people would go to him as a family physician. Even we also shifted to him. And though we were in BTM layout, we would go all the way to Jayanagar 9 block. Why? Because there were 20, 30 years back, there were no clinics, no doctors, no medical pharmacists. So we all had to go there. The amount of time he would spend, he would not give any appointment. It's a waiting system. But still, though you have to wait for 1 hour or so, the patients would be there for the simple reason he talks to them. And he says, I'm not in a money-making ritual here. I would want the patient to go back happy, getting the feeling, yes, my problem is lessened. Maybe it may not be lessened, but because he talks to them and gives them his full attention, which you don't find in specialist hospitals nowadays. So I do miss my general practitioner who used to sit with us and ask for a problem. When I spoke to him, he said, there you go, I have left off the practice 4 years back, 2020, when he reached 60, 65 years, he said, enough of this practice. But he remembered me and he was voluntarily spoke to me for half an hour, giving me all the details.
Just one sentence. You mentioned about the doctor talks to the patient. What we need today is more of LMPs. When I was a child, we used to go to a licensed medical. I wrote about this 10 years ago. LMP should be listening medical practitioner. We have forgotten to look at the patient. We have forgotten to listen to what they have to say. We have forgotten to touch them. This is the problem with medicine today. I don't know how we are going to overcome it. Unless and until we become LMPs, we cannot. We can sit and talk for hours together, but if we don't listen, touch them, and look at them with empathy gaze, medicine has stopped being a healing profession.
I really do miss this Dr. M.R. Krishnamurthy.
Listening.
Yes, somebody to empathize. Not only listening, he empathizes with your problem.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ranjit Vishwanath. I do want to disagree with the fact that you said that we have stopped listening. I think people who go into, I also come from the medical profession and I've been dealing with public health for the past 4 or 5 years. The more we over specialize, we forget the fact that the human body has many facets to it, like the spiritual component, the mental component, and we go with a magnified lens. In fact, I was just speaking with Dr. Arvind, and I was telling the teaching that I did in CMC Vellore. I told him there was nothing in the classroom to learn, and the things that I learned, I remember is like going to the village, maybe like after our NCD management, we'll sit with the elderly and we'll just talk and be part of them. And I've seen them express more when they feel that you are no longer a doctor and then you're a human being. And I've seen interns also being, I'm sure even in John's, there would be people, one or two, like, yes, that is handful.
But my question is to Dr. Bobby, how there are programs like community orientation program, but something that happened like 6 months back in my college itself, I tried to introduce theater. So we introduced something called the theater of the oppressed. It's a concept by Augusta Ball. So where we tell the narrative and then we try to bring a new perspective, saying that this could be the ideal way. Now, the alternative way, which is the better, what you feel is better for society. Now, I kind of brought in a real incident of child sexual abuse, but I realized that that young age group is not so sensitized to deal with such a matter. Like it takes ages, like it takes at least a maturity to bring in that into theater and say that, okay, uh, I I felt it actually. They were giggling. I'm like, this is a real incident. And you are the future practitioners. If you start giggling with an incident like this, if you're not sensitive now, then what can be the future? So how do you like? I think the problem is they are from an urban society coming to a rural area, listening to the problem. Where does the gap and how to address a gap is? That's a dilemma that I also have no answer.
I'm looking at the clock. The battery on this mic is also dying, so I'm getting multiple messages. I'm going to not ask Dr. Bobby to answer that, but in their final comments, he will address that. But okay, because we said we'd like to hear the people who are online. Yes, Partha, please unmute and share with us your journey.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Partho from Dhaka, Bangladesh. So it's a great pleasure for me to present my story here. And thank you, Ishita and Radhika, for giving me the chance. Basically, I'm an independent filmmaker. So when I discovered that I had a progressive lung disease, and in Dhaka, there are lots of the air pollution recently, that it's increased day by day. So doctor said that as early as possible, if I leave the Dhaka, it will be better for my health. So when I discovered that, from that time I start the journaling. Every day I start footage. I start take the save the prescription, the report, everything. And the thing is, this disease create itself. It's a symptom that it's lots of the anxiety, and when it I can anxiety create, it's some kind of blood come from my mouth. So when I starting the archiving my all the things like video, the prescription, all the thing, it's kind of healing process itself. So it's helped me a lot to just don't think it's a disease. It's a kind of new normal life for me. And how I struggle to breathe the outside of the Dhaka. So it's a kind of it's a kind of bad experience for me, because last 20 years I stay in this Dhaka. Now the situation is I can't take a fresh bath in the outside. So this is the kind of story of mine, and how as a patient it's changed all of the point of view about the life. When someone suddenly discovered that before the disease I have a normal people, so after the disease my identity change. So main identity is a patient of XYZ, something like that. And it's all changed the point of view about the life. It's changed the point of view about the people, and the people who just discovered that they have some kind of progressive disease. They know day by day it will increase and it will make more vulnerable status for their life. So how come the people kind the peace of from that? How can the people can get the rest of the time they have in their hand? So how they live better? So I think I find this is the way, because I am the filmmaker. All the time I want to share my story. So it's give me the another kind of healing process with the medication. So that's my story, and thank you, Ishita and Radhika, to present my story in this place.
Thank you so much, Partha. That was, a very good insight you gave about another form or subjective form of healing, which you yourself know and understand and go through. So you can see his visual book about saying goodbye Dhaka. And I think it's very poignant right now with the situation in Dhaka and what he's talking about. So do visit that corner. I'm just going to ask Parvati, since we've not heard her experience of the complexity of what she has been going through. If you feel today is not the right time, also give you a sneak peek, everyone, that this exhibition is going to continue, but she is also going to use another mode of communication, which is her own body, towards the latter part of the exhibition. So would you like to share now or wait for that time?
I'm going to try speaking. So moving is my natural way of communicating and sharing. At first, I want to say deep resonance with all that is spoken to in the room. It's moving. It's painful. As an artist, I'm trained to feel pain and joy and reflect it back to all of you. The joy of seeing an uncle in the neighborhood is something I missed when I grew up. And that's what I see reflected today when so much of displacement exists. I don't know what my roots are. So where do I go to look for answers? I don't know what my great-grandmother ate to nourish her body. So how am I going to find my answers? And every time I go to I'm aware of this movement and the flowing of emotion, and I'm happy that you're witnessing it. When I go to a doctor, unless I have a lot of money, I can't be promised that I will heal. I'm talking about a typical middle class anxiety. It seems to be an anxiety-driven life and broken, fragmented questions that don't seem to find a continuum of thread of answers, because meaning and healing isn't a continuum. I mean, you know that, in medicine, as movement practitioners, we are now studying fascia, which seems to be something that is nourishing as an idea, something that is holding it all together, something that has a meaning, which is not like in blocks and bulks that somebody knows more than the other. It is being found and woven in exchanges and interactions, and that you're occupying a space of like this where we all don't know. And we have to find out how often are we occupying the spaces where we don't know. Like, of course, you're talking about medical education. And I wonder, are there moments when the student knows more than the teacher? And how am I listening back? And if I'm not listening back, how am I listening to what the times mean from me to give back to them? And this I speak, as even as an arts practitioner, because hey, like now we are confined into these stages and prosceniums where the lights will come on and I have to perform. It doesn't work like that. We are creating this together. We're going searching for answers together. I mean, this attitude of entertainment, delivery on, instance. I mean, who are we to deliver like this? We're not. I mean, even a machine needs electricity. It is a moment of inspiration that allows the continuum of meaning making to happen. When are we allowing for that? Like this hands are for doing, but they're also for feeling and listening and receiving. And I'm reflecting back my times to you, the medical profession. I mean, you're healers, we're artists, we also believe we're healers. And maybe generations ago, we would have all occupied the same page, exchanging notes on the mind and body. But here, I don't know how to exchange my notes with you. How do we find the common language? I mean, it's a huge question. And it's heartening to see spaces like this where, a suggestion is being made.
like a possibilities being sparked. And I see this, and I don't mean in any disrespect to the men. But I'm noticing that the women are going looking for answers because it's hurting. It's hurting too much. And to create space, these structures are not working. Whatever structures we have made so far, they're great. I mean, they may have served the time, but they are not what we need now. We need to rethink the structure, like be it in arts, in institutions, in the way we are communicating. And even this, we are sitting in stage. I mean, who sits like this all day? I feel stifled. To be able to move, to be able to express, to move you, to be moved by you. I mean, I need more space than this. When I walk, I need to be able to engage with life around me. It's not in like cubicles, and then I will see you as one. Then how am I supposed to empathize? I will see you as how am I going to know numbers? I mean, I will see you as, oh, that's a volume of people coming at me. It's not people, it's just volume coming at me. Then when I was overwhelmed by this, and in my art practice as a theatre practitioner, one of the spaces I think pretty much every tradition points you to is yourself. And I feel like it's generally, and I don't mean it as a finger pointing at institutions, it's just the nature of the hierarchy of mind, that my agency is taken away. You're not telling me that, hey, you can heal. You have it in you to heal. You have it in you to grow and thrive. You're telling me you don't know enough. What do you know? You don't know enough. Go stand in the line. Keep quiet. Put on your shoes. Keep quiet. Why are you running around? Why can't you sit? I mean, we're doing this to children fairly early, dumbing down their meaning making, their ability to respond as human beings. Then why? Then obviously I will not know how to respond to somebody who seems very different from me. Because you've been told that, hey, you've been given these are the set of responses you're supposed to have when you engage with a human being. So when a fresh human being comes, you don't know, what do I grab? My mind has no reference. It is not creative. So what do you grab? It is afraid of being in the present and say, hey, dude, I don't know what your problem is, but we can find out together. And I'm saying, not as a practice, I'm saying, even as an artist, like I get a character, or I'm sitting with my fellow artists, I really don't know this body. I don't know who, but I have to trust. How do I do it?
It's on a very humbling note that I, as moderator, ask my panelists to give their last thoughts, especially about from here, where next.
I want to actually address the question that you raised about, how can doctors empathize when the patient load is very high? So I too worked in a rural hospital for 3 years. It was an legacy project. And we had a set of circumstances which we could not control. We had patients coming in on buses to the hospital. We had to finish the outpatient at 5 o'clock because that was the last bus that left. If they didn't catch the bus, they would be away from their families for the whole night. They might be under the open roof that we had outside the hospital. So we did have this pressure. And I think one of the things is, for the solutions don't have to be just with doctors. I mean, the doctors aren't, when we say the patient's story needs to be heard, what we did there was, when I sat in my clinic, and it was structured because there was such a huge number of patients coming in. At my table, there was also a paramedical worker who had been trained. And I think the patients were incredibly understanding, because they were part of this huge crowd, and they realized that, yes, I do have to finish the outpatient so that everyone can go home. That was not in my hands. but they felt their story was heard because they first went to the paramedical worker, they talked there. I was here and I could also hear while I was seeing another patient or writing something down. So I think, and the other thing that we've been engaged with Manjulika and I is we worked with Tata Memorial Hospital in Bombay, where again they are a referral hospital with huge number of patients. And what we worked with them on is their patient navigator program, where they realize that doctors don't have the time to see the patients merely because of the load which they can't control. They can't control the number of patients who are going to come in through an OPD and register and be there, and they have to see them. So there is an entire cadre of patient navigators who are actually with the patient. And I think this speaks to other people being involved actually. It's not, the doctor is not on the top of a ladder and talking down, because in order to include other people in the process requires trust. And actually patients benefit from that. We know even in hospitals, patients tend to talk to nurses more than they would talk to doctors. Why? Because they are available, number one, and they're perhaps more open to it. But that actually is, I don't think it's an insurmountable process. It is possible to be creative, to be open to other people coming in and there is the whole movement of what this pastoral sort of care, where there are people who are in hospitals who are there, where the listening presence is much more than just being part of a treatment protocol.
Yeah, I mean, it's been most, it's really moving to listen to many of these stories. And, I say the key to, maybe resolving many of these challenges, whether they're institutions or smaller clinics, is to build empathy in individuals. That's got to be the core of everything we do. Right from the time that a child is in school, like you said, it doesn't make sense now to tell them that there are 9 planets in the solar system or no 9 planets today. Pluto is there, tomorrow Pluto is not there. That's not the education that we need to offer our children. We need to build them into empathetic individuals who embrace their own selves, they embrace the diversity of the world, and we need to start young. We understand the challenges in institutions where, when Mario just said, the doctor to patient ratio is so high. It's not that your patient wants to listen to you for half an hour. Just an empathetic gesture is more than enough to make you feel comfortable, to make you feel that you're in a safe space. Actually, a lot of the conversations, that emerged were about that. And, we've got to build that right from the time, like a child is young. And I think stories play the biggest part in making individuals empathetic. I mean, if you haven't read or have not had the opportunity to read for whatever reasons, putting yourself in the shoes of characters in other books really teaches you a lot more, to face life, to meet different kinds of people, and to build empathy. Whether we're teachers, whether we're doctors, whether we're professors, artists, empathy is what our world needs today, and stories help with that.
It has been extremely gratifying to be part of this and to have the conversation from all sides, both as medical historians, doctor, community members. But what I think for me this moment is kind of, we all search for a beginning, to write a story, to find a character, to build an archive, to build your narrative. Maybe this exhibition and the continuous workshops has been a beginning. So perhaps everybody in their own way to keep on looking for that moment of beginning where you create your own narratives, you alter it, disrupt it, move ahead with it. Maybe in this form as an exhibition, maybe you continue in it through your own journeys, maybe medical practitioners will inculcate them in their own stories, in the way they look at patients or other stakeholders in the community. It's not only a doctor and patient. There's a larger community who's involved in the histories and everyday management. So, and for archives and museums, I think it's time that we all look at disrupting them. And hopefully these are the ways we go for it. Thank you.
So Radhika, thanks a lot for organizing this, and I'll come to your question a little later. I mean, the answers are very difficult, and Mario gave us some ideas to what we can do. But I'm also finding that we work with a lot of patient navigators, community animators and stuff, and they're also becoming medicalized. They hardly spend time with patients. You set them out there and say, okay, do stuff will come back, but they just look at BP, pulse, sugar levels and come back and tell you. But they're not going back into the stories of what those people's lives are. It's a constant challenge. I don't have an immediate answer to what you're asking. But beyond that, nothing else, Manjulika. I think by the that probably the senior most faculty member left here in the room, I can probably close this meeting.
Thank you. There are formalities that Radhika would want to finish, but I just want to say that this is the beginning to all of us here. What has been wonderful, as I can see, is this pause moment that we have given ourselves. And I want to commend most of all, so I would like to give a big hand to those few medical students who have been here. Few of them have left, but I know other people, the faculty members, have given up to come here. So definitely full marks to you, and also to tell you that such an exhibition requires you to immerse yourself in those stories. Ranjit, to your answer, it's not a immediate response. It's not a quick solution. It's a slow process. We've started the journey here. Radhika, Ishita, thank you very much. We should continue with.
Okay, so already a lot has been said. I don't know what this closing address can do differently. Ishita Shah, I'm a designer and a historian, and I now run a collective called Curating for Culture with an interest to curate community engagement for marginalized histories and narratives. So one more attempt at that, as you all said, it will keep going, it should keep going, but couldn't have been possible, of course, without the contributors, of course, without perhaps the passion that Curating for Culture brings in, but biggest thanks to Radhika for holding the fort, because for if I understand correctly, it's been going on in her head for at least 3 years, or maybe longer. And perhaps I also know of the challenges to run a museum that she runs. I've also had institutional roles before. So one is to work with the system, one is to try and break the system, and one is to work out of it. So when I'm standing out of it, I know of the struggles it would take to make this possible. So first of all, thanks to Radhika, and then of course to the entire team at St. John's for making it happen. I think it must have been, and we saw all the surprises yesterday. There's a lot of curiosity. It's going to continue for the rest of the 8 days as well. So thanks to them. And of course, any of these engagements don't make sense if we don't speak about it or we don't talk about it. So one of the value sets that we work with is we don't want to do a show and walk away kind of exhibitions. We want these discussions, the safe space, the conversation where I think in your own moments, you also shared your experience of vulnerabilities, which is very important. So thank you so much to all the panelists for making time, talking to us and to the audience. And I know that these ripple effects or these conversations will have its ripple effects. I will end on the note. Somebody asked me, how am I feeling? I said, I'm feeling very poetic this morning. And I think that comes as a surprise because I never thought poetry would emerge for me in a medical institution. And it has emerged. So we let itself write forward. Thank you, everyone, online and to be here, and those who will be coming for the exhibition later as well. We would like to thank our guests for their time and their efforts and thoughts. So Radhika, would you want to go first, or maybe Ananya can come first and thank Dr. Mario Vaz. Tejashi, if you can thank Geeta ji. Sorry. Vidya. Too many names. Ananya, if you could thank Ritvika. Industry, we thank Dr. Bobby. Rahima, yes, thank you, dear friend. Dr. Manjulika Vams. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your patient listening till 1 o'clock, not keeping you beyond this. Have a happy lunch and a good weekend ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank